Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Gig. I'm your host, Mike Redman. Today, I have a remarkable guest, someone who's been the invisible hand behind some of the biggest names in the music industry. Andy Franks, renowned road manager, has worked with Coldplay, the Rolling Stones, and many, many other legendary acts. And he's here to give us a glimpse into the world behind the music. Andy's journey is one filled with unforgettable memories and lessons learned. From his special days with Coldplay to a personal journey of resilience and recovery that led him to become the founder of MusicSupport.org, helping everybody in the music business. I'm just so happy to introduce you to Andy Franks. Hi, Franksy. How are you today? Thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I'm honored.
Oh, you're honored. But that makes me feel honored then. Dang. For my listeners who really don't know exactly what a road manager or a tour manager, tour director does, could you tell me a little bit about what the role entails, and what would look successful to you?
Well, they're sort of normally mentally unstable individuals taking around of very wealthy, mentally deranged individuals to play to a lot of people in a venue somewhere and get them home safely. I think that's the short answer. Um, Looking after a tour is a pretty sort of full on thing, and there's a lot of stuff at stake, a lot of people, a lot of money, a lot of people want to come to you, bought a ticket, you want to have a good show. So it's kind of balancing things backstage. It's working with different organizations. Some people, the management are very hands on, sometimes they're not. So you've got to be a very flexible guy, or female, whatever. You can be,
Mm-hmm.
not just men, of course. Um, so you've got to be flexible. You've got to have a sense of humor. Um, got to have the ability to be able to think on your feet all the time. You've got to be not the slightest bit interested in having any sleep or any rest. And you're going to have to answer the most sort of ridiculous questions you never thought would come across your plate.
That, that sounds wonderful. I can't wait to get into it.
Well,
It's funny because when I hear you talking about it, because I've been in the music business since I was 5, so you make it sound quite simple. I know that it's not, and I think probably maybe one of the things that makes it simple to you is because you climbed every rung of the ladder to get there. And
yeah,
you
I
know,
mean, I started. I wouldn't say I started at the bottom, but I did different jobs. So I think as in any in the forces when somebody comes in at colonel, everyone below them thinks the guy's an arsehole. But start in the ranks and work your way up, then you're still an arsehole, but at least you an arsehole that kind of done what other people have done.
yeah,
So it gives you in a way, I think a bit more respect, a bit more understanding. But
sure,
again, that doesn't. There's people that have come up that again are sort of stuck in the past and aren't moving with the times, and that
yeah.
could be as bad as having somebody who comes from a different field coming in. So there's a mixture, but I would say that when you get to be when you're in that position of a tour manager, you need to get people to sort of believe in you.
When you are touring or when you're touring with a big act, like Coldplay or Rolling Stones or somebody, what size crew do you have that you're actually
Um,
managing?
it kind of depends what you're doing, whether you're doing arena show. I tend to do shows that are either arenas or stadiums.
Mm-hmm.
So, although I have done sort of smaller stuff, obviously we're doing theatres and not so much clubs anymore. But dependent on in an arena tour, there's probably about 70 or 80 people. Although we've just done an arena tour with Roger Waters in Europe and uh, in America, and there were 150 people on the road,
Wow.
band in.
Yeah.
So it's a big old sort of, and when you're doing stadiums, it can be more because it depends whether you've got advanced crews and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. it's moving a sort of small town around, but a lot
Hmm.
of that is done by the production people. Our
Hmm.
side of it, the tour management. You
Hmm.
tend to be the artist, and you're
Yeah.
moving. Even though my artist party at the moment is about 30 people, so it's a pretty big. I used to go on tours with the band and the crew, and it was like about 12 people. The
Yeah.
whole lot
Yeah.
of the band.
Yeah.
So to have
Yeah.
30 people just in the band pie is a lot, but it's nowhere near as big as a crew. But they also have different areas of need. You know,
Hmm.
so so it's a more sort of defined and specific thing. I think looking after the people rather than
Yeah.
the equipment.
Yeah, that's interesting. Would you maybe we could talk about that just for a second? Basically, when you're lining up a tour and you hire a production company, what does the production company do separate? Because you're working with, like you said, the artist, taking care of the artist, making
Yeah,
sure that
yeah. The
everything on
production,
that's.
the production people, they pretty. I mean, again, it works differently because some productions have been with a band for a long time, so they're used to
Hmm.
using the same people. Some management choose the production people. Sometimes the artist has got sometimes the tour manager chooses them.
Hmm.
So you get to work with people that you know very
Hmm.
well as get to know work with people you've never worked with before.
Yeah.
So again, it's that adaptability. But the production people, they do like it says on the tin. They get the equipment from A to B, they set it all up. In fact, they do all the work. We just we just swan in on our private plane, get picked up by the limos, go to the offices that are already set up, have the wonderful catering, do the show, get back on the plane, and sleep in a five-star hotel. Well,
Yeah,
those
yeah,
those
yeah. Well,
poor fuckers
we're not going
have
to
worked.
spend a lot of time on this, but because you've documented it very well, and you kind of, I think you said in a place like that where we get kind of treated like kings, and that leads to partying and going crazy, and that becomes the habit, and that habit starts replacing the job, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of went south with you. Would you talk just a little bit about that? Because I don't want to spend. You do talk about it a lot in other ones. I really this isn't about that, but uh, a little bit
Yeah.
about that and what how it led to music support.
Yeah, I like a lot of people in the business, and certainly, I started in the 80s when it was pretty much sort of
Mm.
crazy rock and roll stuff. Now things are a little bit more stable, I would say, and it is more of a job now. It's a profession, whereas when we were doing it, we were quite often escaping, from prison or landlords or so. So
Yeah.
but now it's much more a career and a job,
Hmm.
and so there's a lot more to it from that point of view. But yeah, I like a lot of people, got involved in when you're working for those kind of hours.
Hmm.
It's
Sure.
you drink, you take drugs because you think it's going to improve your performance, and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, as most of the drugs don't come in tins with warning on them, it doesn't always tell you what the repercussions are, but yeah, I got caught being I became an alcoholic,
Yeah.
because of pressure, because of myself, because of a lot of sort of factors. And I was functioning, I was still working on tours. I
Hmm.
was drinking an enormous amount of alcohol, but still
Hmm.
functioning.
Yeah.
But in the end, I got fired from Coldplay because the drinking was just out of hand, and it was fair enough. It was, they were
Yeah.
right.
Sure.
Um, but they said, you need to get sorted out. It's one thing that we both agreed on, but I just didn't know how to go about that. And I didn't know there isn't a charity like Music Cares that you have in the States. There isn't really anything like that. So
Right.
there was a charity that was for musicians, and there's a musicians union, but there
Hmm.
isn't anything really for all the crew and the caterers and the drivers and the
Yeah.
people who set the scaffolders, all that kind of stuff. There wasn't. It didn't seem like there was something for that.
Hmm.
So after I recovered, I met a couple of other people that were very interested in a similar sort of idea. And over sort of many meetings in coffee shops in London, we formed this charity called Music Support, and that now is something that goes on to support people in the music business.
That is awesome. That's so awesome. I have a, a friend that, very close friend. I'll make this a real quick story, but he was my bass player for years, and back when I used to play. And he called me, and I hadn't heard from him in like 20 years. And he goes, "Hey, Mike, it's Paul Hill." And he goes, I said, "Paul, it's so good to hear from you." He says, "I needed to call you and apologize, because when we were playing, I was always shit faced drunk." And I was like, he was one of those kind of, I call him an egghead because he was so, smart, so intellectual. I never knew he was drunk. I just thought, he's got a little bit of an attitude tonight. And it was very funny. And then he went on to start the LA chapter of AA for
Wow.
musicians. And that's what he
Wow.
does. So he's at NAM every year, and just a wonderful guy. And so being in the music business, I think one of the messages that I do want to get across this episode is, it's rampant. I used to take medications, if you will, to help me write music because I thought it'd help me write cooler stuff, and
Well,
it's,
it's been used and accepted. I think that's
mhm,
the other thing
yeah,
is that it's not
yeah,
something, and other things people are, stigmatized if they sit at their office smelling a booze. In our
yeah,
business, it wasn't, it was just like, well, let's go down the pub, let's all
yeah,
meet
exactly, yeah,
pub, and it was a very macho business as well. There weren't so many sort of women that were involved in it.
mhm,
So men away from home, they just want to party. It's all about sex and drugs and rock and roll. For Jesus,
yeah,
that's why
yeah.
we all got into it, for
I
Christ's
mean, I
sake.
mean, I mean, that's why there is a saying, sex and drugs and rock and roll.
Exactly,
That's why it
exactly.
exists.
But,
So,
it's
te-
so
yeah,
easy to get, to just dive into the cookie jar, sort of, lock, stock, and barrel. So
yeah,
it's a hard business to, that's not to say that and that was the whole thing when we started Music Support.
hmm,
We're not saying we're the only business where
yeah,
drinking drugs are an issue. In fact, I was surprised when I found out it was a problem in the record companies and with
hmm,
the agents and stuff like that, because you tend to think it's all the live stuff, but
yep,
it's because drink and drugs are an issue in all forms of society and in everyone's job. So we don't
yeah,
want to belittle any of that, but it's just that we feel that the pressures that we had
hmm,
relate to what we do. So when we're trying to help people, we can just talk about, when someone's like, I'm going to be on a long tour on a bus and I'm worried
yeah,
about the other guys, and I'm like, well, there's loads of spaces you can hide on a fucking bus, aren't there? Because of course it's it's just being able to cut through all that kind of stuff and speak to people that have lived the same kind of life. I think helps and encourages people to feel a bit more at ease and to be
yeah,
able to sort of discuss what we want to do. And if we can help them, then great.
yeah. That's cool. Good for you. That's an amazing, that's an amazing mission to have been there, and really, it's one thing to say, "Hey, I want to start something like music support," but it's another thing to keep it going. I mean, as
Yeah,
you
but
know,
it's incredible. We've been going for
yeah,
7 years now. We've got like three full-time members of staff. We've
hmm,
got, we run all these mental health first aid courses. We have stuff backstage at festivals. And it's
wow,
really become the go-to kind of charity. And I'd see people I do this big festival in Hyde Park every year, and
mm,
I see a lot of people who come up and, on the crew particularly, who just say thanks, for
yeah,
setting that up. It's really helped us, and that's what it's about. It's not no ego. I don't give a shit about that side of it.
oh, come on, no, no, I'm
I
kidding.
just want to be able to, I just want to be able to give something back to people, and to help
Yeah,
them. And again, that's what our business is all about. When you're setting up a stage and you need a hammer or there's something sort of falling down, people come to help,
right,
you know.
right,
So
yep.
why wouldn't they do it when it's with your
When that
brain
house is
and
crashing down,
drinking? And
yeah, yeah, right. That's
that's the
that's a
sort of business we're in.
Yeah. So tell me, I mean, would you recall a couple memorable stories or about working with Coldplay? I mean, you know, they're a huge band, and before everything started going south for you, I mean, something that was,
Well, I mean,
mhm,
even when it was sort of going south, it was still like I said, there was still lots of times we used to have a football team that we played, a soccer team that we used to play against other act. I tended to be the referee because I was sort of usually still having to work, But I
Oh,
remember
oh,
being at LA Galaxy refereeing a game there with versus Coldplay on their pitch. And I was walking around dressed in my sort of coat on the phone, and I was supposed to be the referee. And I've also got this side issue that from a brain hemorrhage, but that's another story.
oh, geez.
But I was on the phone and something happened and I went, oh, free kick. And this guy shouts, ref, what's the matter? Are you blind? And I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm blind and I'm on the phone, mate. Free kick. So they carried on. But the Coldplay guys are very sort of sweet guys,
They seem like it, yeah.
they are really nice. They did a very nice message for me on my 60th birthday or 65th or something. I can't remember which, but
Well, you sure as heck don't look 65.
well, I'm 67 now actually.
Well,
So yeah,
you look
all
great,
the
man.
pension. I
You,
should
you,
be I
you don't
should be
look any
sick.
worse for the wear, right? No.
Well, yeah, I think the wear's on the inside.
Yeah.
I do a good job of keeping the outside well packaged.
Yeah.
But uh, but no, it's it's been a life well lived. But with Coldplay, I mean there were lots of issues. In fact, there was a incident I had when we were doing the MTV Awards with Coldplay, and I think the Foo Fighters were there, and we
Hmm.
were in Spain or Portugal, and I know the tour manager well, and he was saying, "Oh, we've got to be in London tomorrow because we're doing something." So I'm like, "Well, why don't you get a lift on our plane?" So
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
give the Foo Fighters a lift with Coldplay, and I'm sort of doing, and I decided to show them this trick about how to open a bottle of wine with a Sharpie,
Oh no.
and uh, and I do that, and it goes all over the
Ex-
place. I mean,
explode.
yeah, it was quite a disaster, and I did have a bit of a talking to the next day that maybe I'd been a little bit worse for wear, and it's true, crazy stuff.
It is.
But no, I
Yes.
mean, the guys working with Coldplay, they were fantastic. They were a lovely bunch of people, fantastic band, and they've been very supportive of the charity as well.
Yeah.
They've
That's
helped
great.
us. They donate things to us when we have auctions, and they're really really supportive.
That's awesome. It's funny that I did some work in the film business too, and there's something magical about being on a film set. I'm not even sure how to even express it, but it's just kind of a cool place to be. There's something creative coming at you, and it was like when I was at Criteria in the late '70s, and we had in one room, it was Crosby, Stills and Nash, and the other room was Barbara Streisand and Steely Dan. I mean, Eric Clapton. All these people there at one time, and you just walk around there. It's like, this is fucking amazing, And I feel like the same thing when you're backstage with a big act. There's
Mm-hmm.
something about the energy of all of those people that kind of just permeates everything that makes it magic. And
It's funny. It's actually something that you really get used to
mm,
because that's where you live your sort of life. So a star and a roadie are no real sort of there's no real difference in my eyes.
hmm,
You treat them the way that they need to be treated rather than sort of treat them differently.
yeah,
You have to work at that sort of individual. But when this thing that I do in Hyde Park, we had Bruce Springsteen there this year, we had
oh,
Billy Joel,
nice,
Lana Del Rey, we had Guns N' Roses, we had Take That. There's a whole mixture of all these different people, and it's really interesting.
hmm,
I run the artist liaison, and it's really interesting sort of meeting people from the other side of the fence. It gives you a better understanding again
yeah.
of what was a tour manager, because
Hmm.
you're having to deal with all the tour managers.
Mm. That's it's interesting you mentioned no difference between crew and star. I have a question for you. What's some of the craziest shit you've ever seen on a rider for an artist?
Um, I don't know. I mean, there's people used to put stuff. We used to put stuff on the Depeche Mode rider when I first started in America. I used to write twiglets, which are they're these like biscuity things in ink that are covered in like yeast in that Marmite that some people like, some people don't, or whatever. But it's quite a quintessentially English thing. And you'd know if somebody had read the rider because they would say, what are these twiglets? You know,
Oh,
apart from the
yeah.
smart asses had an English person working for them and knew exactly what they were. But you know, things get put into riders to check and see if
Oh.
people but there's a very funny one that you can go online.
Mm-hmm.
This guy called Josh Bain, he was worked for Iggy and the Stooges,
Mm-hmm.
and if you check out Iggy and the Stooges tour rider, it's the
Okay.
funniest you've ever. It
Uh,
really is. You know, his explanation from his side of it of what he requires. You know
uh-huh.
that.
Uh-huh.
So I think don't mess around because these guys want it. It's brilliant.
So let me ask you this: Are you how are you balancing your work life with your home life these days?
Well, I mean, it's funny because I kind of after the Coldplay stuff and everything, I tended to sort of step back a little bit. I was working with an English band called Madness, and we were
Mm-hmm.
doing mostly shows in the UK, and there was, you know, it was relatively sort of laid back. But now doing the Roger stuff, there's a lot of time of being away, and it's kind of like being back on tour. So
Mm.
it's quite sort of full on, you know. So being at home is nice. And as you saw, as I showed you, you know, I live right on the
Yeah, yeah.
seafront.
It's yes, it's
Couldn't
gorgeous.
be nicer. I've got a lovely garden out the back as well. And when it's sunny, which it is today, you know,
Uh-huh.
then it, it's a fantastic place to be. But it's, you know, I've still got a few more years left of me, I think. I hope anyway.
You
Uh,
sound like it. You got the energy. I can see it in your face. I can see it in your personality. It takes a
I think
special
that's just the
person.
sun. That's the sun reflecting off the sea. I don't know if it's
Oh, it looks quite good.
do.
So, Francie, what's the most rewarding part to you of being a road manager, a tour manager?
Um, I think, you know, just experiencing things you wouldn't, the average Joe wouldn't normally
Hmm.
sort of experience, you know. And like I say, I try not to have sort of too many airs and graces about, I appreciate the places that I go to. I try to respect them but it's, you know, it's a pretty wacky sort of
Hmm.
lifestyle. You know, when I went on my first private plane in like 1987,
Wow.
and I tend to spend more time on private planes than I do commercially. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's, you know, it's that's just kind of that's my life, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember someone once saying to Chris Martin, you know, about the fact that he supposedly everyone always says he's like this super green guy and
Hmm.
thinking about the environment, but you fly around on private jets, and he said, but you have to get to work. And I thought it was fair enough, you know, because he does have to. He gets
Yeah.
around to do the stuff that, you know, and okay, he's got a carbon footprint, you know, but he's doing something about it, and
Sure.
that's all you do. If everyone does their best, it'll be a better place. You know, we can't change it overnight, but we at least we can try to sort of do our stuff. Whoops, excuse me. So no, I think that you know, people like Chris are great guys to, you know, to just want to make, they're trying to make a difference now, you know, and I think
Hmm.
they are
Yeah.
teaching again other acts will
Yeah.
follow.
They, so I mean, we're talking about big dollars on these tours. I mean, they're getting, astronomical these days. Are you, is part of your job, like overseeing the finances of this tour?
No, no, thank God. The guy who does look after all the money but on the Roger tour is a very, I can never understand how chilled he is, you know, when he's got so much at stake. And there is a lot at stake, you
Oh
know. I mean,
gosh, yes.
Roger is a very active person on social media, and you
Mm-hmm.
know there are lots of people that are trying to cause him harm and trying to make his
Mm.
life difficult, you know. And he soldiers on, but there is a cost to that.
Yeah.
And there are, you know, they're looking after a tour of this size. you
Hmm.
need somebody that's got their shit together, because there's a lot of money at stake. It's like anything, if you go into Google, there's a
Hmm.
whole floor of accountants probably looking after that stuff, So
Yeah.
even though none of them are dealing with the tax because they don't pay any tax anywhere, do they?
No, they
So
don't.
they've probably got, I don't know if it's on Google, but they've probably got lots of buildings dedicated not to do that, So, but no, it's looking after the money on a rock and roll tour. But now it's all electronic. I mean,
Sure.
it's in the day there used
Yeah.
to be cash, and that was a
Oh,
very
no, I actually headed up that side of a tour for a long time ago for Evelyn Champagne King and the Tramps. We were in Caracas, Venezuela, at the Poliedro for like a full week, and they were supposedly sold out. But we figured out that the people at the ticket windows were taking $1 for the tour and $1 for themselves on every ticket. And what was supposed to be at that time, which was big dollars, which was like 8 or 10 million for the week. I think they said we made $500,000. But unfortunately, because it's a military-run country, and the military was getting most of this money, we had no recourse. It was
yeah,
like, so you're done with your music now, get out of our country.
yeah.
And I was thinking about this morning the fact that now that it's digital, it's going to be much easier to see the problems, I would think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, obviously, the sort of digitization of money has made it sort of less of a. You weren't thinking that someone's going to try and rob you at the airport for the same thing, but there's other kinds of theft, that sort of
Yeah.
goes on. So I think it's everything is digitized now,
Mm-hmm.
and back in I started touring before there were mobile phones, so
Yeah.
that's the difference that I've seen, there wasn't sort of constant contact with all the people at the venue about your
Mm-hmm.
arrival, everything,
Mm-hmm.
uh, it was writing him a letter to say we'll be arriving at this time, and hopefully that the postman delivered it.
And
So
hopefully,
it's
yeah.
changed considerably from that, but accounting is one thing, and the money has got, back in the day people used to get paid in cash.
Right.
You
Right.
can't
Right.
you can't do that anymore because there's not that much cash around,
Yeah.
to be
Yeah,
able
that's
to do some of these acts.
wow. So, tell me what special skills you think would help somebody be successful in a job like yours.
Um, well, like I say, it's certainly a job for it's people that if they are within the ranks of they're working within music and they think that they can have a go, I would say try it, but don't go in with your eyes closed because there are a lot of aspects to it that people be like, oh, well, I didn't expect I'd have to do that. And,
Mm,
looking after the band's families and all kinds of things that you would think that, oh, there's someone else dealing with that,
mhm.
there is no one else dealing with it. Just remember, when when it's all going great, nobody gives a shit who you are, what you're
Yeah.
doing. As soon as it's going wrong, everyone just looks down the line, and the tour manager is usually the one stood at the end on the phone, not even realizing they're all looking at him. So yeah, so it's a job that you have to be prepared to make decisions and take the lead and that doesn't mean that you're all the time pushing in front of people, that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. You do it in different ways, but I would say preparation as well is something that is really important. If you prep your stuff, then when you turn up you're just dealing with the shit, whereas if you turn up and then you've got to be, oh, we're come to check in, oh, you haven't made a booking, and you've
Mhm.
got to do that at the reception. That's why I work with my travel agents like 6 months, 9 months in advance of a
Mm.
tour, so that I can make sure we've got the hotels we want, we've got the rooms we want, and
Yeah.
fixing up all the other sort of travel. So it's all in the prep, And
Mhm.
sometimes if you do a lot of preparation, people think, well, he doesn't really do much. It's
Mhm.
because he's done it all, and that's
Yeah.
that's his job is the preparation, and now it's running it, Whereas the grafters on the tour, they're getting very little sleep, but they're working physically all day, and
Mhm.
mentally, of course, but physically. we're doing our stuff in the background, but it's no less important.
Oh my gosh, well, without it, there is no tour. So,
Well, and if the band doesn't turn up, sometimes the equipment doesn't turn up, and we can busk it. But when the band doesn't turn up, that's a tougher. Trying to get those outfits on and the wigs, is
okay, I got just a couple more questions. Then you just made me think of one. What? Tell me a story about a show that was going really, really south and how you saved it.
Well, I remember there was a thing with Depeche Mode back in it must have been maybe 1990 or something, when we were doing Park City in by Salt Lake City, Park
Mm-hmm.
West.
Yeah.
And that was an outdoor ski resort, but they used to do shows in there in the summer. And we were there, and there was this torrential rainstorm. All the people were already in,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like about 17,000 people stood up on the hillside, and it absolutely pissed it down. And so the show had to be cancelled, but everyone's already got their sort of tickets. So what do you do
Mm-hmm.
with the stars and whatever? And we found that in town there was an arena. They'd had a rodeo on the day before.
Uh
So
huh.
we all got down there to sort of help clear all the stuff out and took everything down there and set up and did the show the next day. And it was just on, look, if you had a ticket, just showed sort of a bit of a ticket and come on down, but we got, and in Germany we had a show where when Depeche were much smaller, and we got up to the gig and started setting up. It was Christmas. I went for a wander around Frankfurt. I got back and everyone's loaded out, and I'm like, "What's going on?" It's like they've cancelled the show. There was again, another political thing had happened, and people thought that Depeche was some kind of like demon band, so they cancelled in this place in Frankfurt, and we found another venue about 40 miles down the road. So we got the trucks to go down there. We got another crew down there. We set all
Wow.
the stuff up. We opened a little bit late, but the band went on stage like on the night. We even had buses taking people from the old
Oh,
place to the
really?
new place. It was amazing. We did the show. The promoter came around. He gave everyone some cash. He said, "I've never ever seen anything like that in my life." And
Oh, that is so cool.
yeah, that was
So you have to, like you said earlier, you really need to be able to think on your feet.
yeah, and also there's that thing that the show must go on. I mean, people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference with our business and with like TV, with a lot of
Yep.
things. If something doesn't happen on time, it's not the end of the world, But in our business, it is, and
Yes.
especially with broadcasting to places and all that kind of stuff, and something goes down, it could be a nightmare. So yeah, you've got to be on your toes, and you've got to be pretty punctual.
Punctual. Yes. So just two more things. Along the lines of what you were just talking about a minute ago, with the skills that go along with somebody that might want to get in your business. If I was to say, "Oh, I love this," it sounds like something I'd really like to do. How would I go about getting my foot in the door to work up to
Um,
that position?
Well, there are colleges now that run these sort of courses. There's one in
Mm.
England, BIMM. There's one in Brighton actually. I've done talks there, and they have. It's not just for musicians; it's for people that want to get involved in staging, in production, in tour management,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of stuff. They run pretty varied courses at colleges. They have courses down. I mean, I don't know all the prospectus. I've done talks at colleges. And so there's ways of sort of finding out. Again, if you've got friends that have got a band, just get involved with them. Go down and sort of help out, because especially if you say you can, you'll sort out the get a truck for them, or you'll book the hotel for them, or you'll do something, or
Mm.
just get sort of involved. They might be happy that someone else wants to do it.
Right.
And volunteer for stuff, volunteer for things at gigs. Again, if sometimes you like the local stage crew or something, and they're like, "Fuck, we need someone to go and do the spotlight or do
Mm-hmm.
something." Can you do it? If you've done it before, even if you've only done it once before, you don't need to
Mm-hmm.
say that. They'll give you the job over someone that hasn't. So
Right. Right.
all those little things, just sort of put yourself about, and keep bothering people, and
Keep bothering
some
them.
yeah, keep bothering them. Someone will do it. Well.
So That's awesome. Last question here, Francie. So when you're done with the Roger Waters tour, who would you like to work with that maybe you haven't worked with before?
Um, to be honest, I don't think there is anyone because that old adage of never meet your heroes,
Hmm.
can be so
Mm,
true
really?
because I have a relationship with the people that I work for.
Hmm.
I try to be sort of friends and do stuff and whatever, but there's no doubt in my mind that they're the artist, they're the boss, I'm the
Hmm.
tournament, I work for them. End of
Hmm.
story. We're
Yeah.
not there to sort of to kind of get on. So with anything when and I'm a fan of music, so when you meet people that you're like, oh my god, you want them to be something as is anybody else, and then you
Sure.
find out maybe they're not, that can be a bit of a pain in the ass. So it's not
Yeah.
necessarily working for heroes. Nowadays it's working for if somebody is a decent person, if
Hmm.
they're doing good kind of touring, and if they can afford me, then
Yeah.
I'm there.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. What's the rest of the day look like for you?
Yeah, there's some more, we got some flights to book and stuff like that to get on with, so it's still carrying on as it always does. Not at such a frantic pace, but yeah, bubbling along.
You have a great one.
Thank you very much. Nice
Okay.
meeting you. Thanks
You
for
too.
asking. Appreciate it.
Theme music for Gig with Mike Redman was composed and produced by Other Animal. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Gig with Mike Redman. If you like what you heard, I'd ask that you subscribe and like us. And finally, if you have questions about a job or ideas for an episode, contact me at gigwithmikeredman@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Mike Redman, signing off.